starting what could be a new beginning of a whole new world history. Coming to you live from the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit main press center in Goyang, roughly 30 kilometers south from the border truce village of Panmunjom, where the leaders of South and North Korea have resumed their afternoon session. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is Arirang's special coverage of the 2018 Moon Jae-in Kim Jong-un Summit. Now, it's been a very busy morning here on the Korean Peninsula. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appeared at about 9:30 South Korean time for his historic meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. And we want to delve in further and dissect the summit with experts and a fellow journalist. I have in the studio with me, to my right, Stefan, resident representative, Konrad Adenauer Foundation, Korea. Welcome to the program. I know you were a German expert on North Korea. You've been to North Korea a fair amount of times yourself.
Yes.
So welcome. And to my left, Brian PADDEN, VOA's Seoul Bureau Chief. You've covered the Korean Peninsula as a whole for many, many years, and an expert yourself.
Not an expert, but been dedicated to covering all the rapid-fire developments here.
Excellent. So let's look into this issue. So what we saw, first of all, 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. We saw Kim Jong-un, the third generation dictatorial leader, if you will, cross this MDL, what's basically a concrete slab, into the southern territory for the first time ever for a North Korean leader to do so. What was your take on it?
It was surreal. It was surreal when you think about the extended handshake across the borderline, the laughing, the smiling, the walking across, the invitation, come on over to the north, all in a very warm, comfortable manner, where 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after the summit is over, anyone who tries that will get shot. So it was kind of a surreal moment of humanity that kind of pushed away these 60 years of demarcation and separation.
What about for you? Of course, you coming from Germany, who's experienced a similar situation like that of Korea.
It's been truly a remarkable day today, an amazing day and amazing moments we've seen and you've just described. That is very true, and that is, from a European point, very much remarkable. You've just been in the introduction, and also you, Brian, just described the setting and where we are coming from. We are coming actually from a very hostile situation at the very spot where they met today. Just a few months ago, it was early November, we had shootings going on along the military demarcation line, and pretty close to the site where they met today, there was a soldier trying to escape, almost shot to death by his comrades. So that is actually where we're coming from, and that kind of shows and demonstrates the enormous amount of distance that has been covered and taken to get where we are today.
Now, we saw ceremonies being held. Kim Jong-un saw basically a ceremonial military, traditional military parade. South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un walking side by side to the Freedom House of Panmunjom and, exchanging pleasantries. What would you say made this possible? I mean, this is something, I think, to take it right out of Kim Jong-un's mouth, according to our Panmunjom press pool, was that this, coming here took him about, a couple of minutes just crossing over the MDL. He could not believe how long it took for a North Korean leader to do so. What changed in the matter of, a couple of months from what initiated this, which was Pyeongchang Olympics? From Pyeongchang to Pyongyang, when the South Korean art troops went to perform. So from Pyeongchang to Pyongyang, and now to Panmunjom, and hopefully to peace. What changed this? What happened? Anyone weigh in? Jump right in.
Well, I think North Korea and the leadership, they've made a strategical shift and a strategical change of policy, well, at the end of last year, maybe in November, somewhere around that timing. And then they decided that, well, they can't continue the way things were going. It was escalating, and there was the possibility and the chance of further escalation. So, so they opted for a strategical change, and they had a roadmap set up, and they used, you've mentioned the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games alongside the way to demonstrate this willingness to talk, this willingness for dialogue, and this willingness to change. And of course, the grounds was laid out by President Moon before, so actually there was to quite some extent a cohesion of interest, and that was used and that came together. And indeed, the Olympic Games had a major catalyzing factor and a speeding up of the atmosphere and the dialogue format that we are seeing now.
I think that will be long an issue of investigation and debate over why there was this pivot from confrontation to diplomatic outreach on the part of North Korea. Was it a strategic calculation within itself? Did they decide that they have reached the level of nuclear development to develop this intercontinental ballistic missile that could threaten the United States, and they achieved their goal? Was it President Moon's outreach and invitation to come to the Olympics, or was it U.S. President Donald Trump's maximum pressure policy that really focused a lot of foreign policy attention, went from President Obama's strategic patience of ignoring North Korea, basically, to President Trump giving them a lot of attention, not positive attention, and ultimately imposing what is could be a virtual ban on all North Korean exports? Did that really change North Korea's calculation, or was it a combination of all three?
Well, there are quite a few hints that it was a combination of all of what you've mentioned, and that indeed the sanctions did play quite some role. If one visits Pyongyang these days, it is obvious that the gasoline prices are higher than they've used to be, that the number of buses and cars on the street because of oil shortage are on the decline. So I would say that from the second half of last year, there are hints, and the hints are getting more precise and more concrete that the sanctions are actually working. So of course that contributed to what we are seeing now, and but that also can be part of a strategy. A strategy can be fully voluntary, but it can be also, of course, supported and fueled by other factors, let's say neutrally, and I think that is what we are seeing exactly here.
From the latest series of events or behaviors coming from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, it definitely does not seem like he's just a spontaneous, childish person. He seems very strategically focused. He seems like, as President Donald Trump put it very recently, all of a sudden, he seems like a brilliant man to a certain extent. Would you agree with that? He's pretty strategically well focused.
Is he an honorable rocket man? Is he brilliant? Is he impulsive? I mean, there's a lot of reading into his intentions, a lot of reading into this strategy. We don't know, right? We don't know what's going on inside the inner circle of North Korea, but you know, when we talk about North Korea's strategy, a lot of analysts I've talked to kind of are very skeptical that this time it will lead to something different, given that it's following so far the similar pattern from past nuclear agreements. North Korea creates a crisis with increased provocations, and then it is willing to engage in talks to reduce that crisis. But at the same time, they maintain at the end of the day a higher level of nuclear and missile capability, and get rewarded for it. Is that a strategic calculation? Did North Korea get pushed into this by the pressure? Did they take advantage of the South Korean outreach? It's hard to say, and I'm personally, that's what I'm looking for today. I'm trying to find hints and indications that there is more to this than these bold and broad pronouncements. Something to indicate that this time it will lead to something that's really significant. There will be real reduction in its nuclear arsenal.
But if I may add, what I think is amazing is the media coverage, for example, here in South Korea, the global coverage. But on the contrary, in North Korea, this topic and the development of the past weeks and months are almost hidden. So only a very short time ago, the North Korean media started to give hints about what's going on that major political stage. And I think that is amazing, and one can ask why that is like that. Maybe the leadership in the North, maybe they have difficulty to explain to their own people why, after all those years of propaganda, now things are changing at this kind of speed and in this kind of way. So there are a few question marks in that sense. And on the other hand, you were wondering about the emotions. I think there was quite some emotion. One could even see today when the two presidents met. Mr. Kim Jong-un was a bit nervous at the very beginning, I thought. And the calmer part of the two was President Moon Jae-in, according to my interpretation of the situation. And of course, the US president is also likely to be emotional. Kim Jong-un tends to be that way, and so President Moon in this triangle he does have a different role. He's more the calmer part in this game, and I think that's very crucial and very valuable, because he can not mediate, but he can explain, moderate and facilitate. Right. Exactly. That's quite a crucial role in all of this, I think.
Now, Brian, I want to know from the U.S. perspective, from U.S. media perspective. Brian, don't forget that.
As the spokesman for all U.S. media, go ahead.
What's your key focus covering the Inter-Korean Summit this time? I mean, what are you focused on today? What are you looking for as the day develops today?
I'm just looking for substance. I don't think I am looking with a specific angle as a U.S. media outlet. I'm looking, of course, we look at this summit, but in terms of, we look at this summit in terms of setting up a framework for the U.S. North Korea summit, but that's something South Korean officials have said that is their purpose as well with this. So I don't think we're taking a specific angle that's different than what is coming from officials here in Seoul. But I'm looking for what of substance. We're seeing a lot of pop and circumstance. We're seeing wonderful images of handshakes and improving relations and reconciliation. But, you know, at the end of the day, what's going to come that is really meaningful out of here, and how will this move the diplomatic process further towards the point where we are going to have a substantial agreement?
Right, how this one is different from the first two summits, the 2000 and 2007, because just as this one we saw the pleasantries, we saw the pomp and circumstance, we saw the smiles and the dinner.
And these are all optimistic signs. I don't want to downplay that part either, because months ago we were talking about, you know, increasing sanctions and possible bloody nose strikes. And so to have this kind of turn towards diplomacy is a very encouraging sign. But the focus of my coverage today is is this sustainable? Is this moving forward? Is this looking towards a grand strategy on North Korea's part to reduce sanctions without giving up the essence of its nuclear program, or is there going to be real change?
What about from your perspective, from the European perspective, what are you looking for in this summit?
Well, I wonder if it's really a Korean day, or if it's part of, you know, the multilateral agenda that we hopefully see in the weeks to come. And I think, of course, at the end of the day, we have both elements. It is both. But looking to my colleagues, to my neighbors, talking to people I meet, Koreans living in Seoul, they are touched by this. They are moved. So I can tell this is primarily a Korean summit. So, and I think that's a strong symbol. And I think that is needed too. We need, of course, both elements. We need the Korean Peninsula to settle down and to get a more peaceful road. But we do need to have this bigger approach too. But I think today is mainly and basically and primarily a day of the two Koreas. For example, when Germany got closer in the autumn of 1989, just a few days before the wall came down, and the days after, it was a German time. And even though they knew it wasn't only Germany to decide about the German unification, it was at least a 4+2 setting, or it was a multilateral approach, and there were other nations to decide in this process. But still, there were times when the nation was happy, simply happy, or had a special certain feeling, and something of that I feel today too in Korea. So I think it's a special in that sense.
Now, another issue that's emerged in recent days is the issue of the formal end of the Korean War. Of course, the Korean War never really ended because it ended in an armistice, which is a truce. And one of the agenda that many have speculated that might be discussed at the leaders' meeting today is a peace treaty, or perhaps not even there, or declaring a formal end to the Korean War. Now, because the armistice was signed by the UNC, represented by the US, China, and North Korea, some say that this is something that cannot just be done by the two Koreas. I know Germany was in a similar situation. What are your views on this? How important is this? What's the significance of this?
Well, this is, again, another positive development, and you're not seeing a strong negative reaction from the U.S. or China, but nor are you seeing them jumping on board at this point, because there's implications, of course, to this. You know, a peace treaty could, once a peace treaty is signed, then the U.S. role here in South Korea would come under question, or would be a part of that. So while there's efforts that can be made between the two Koreas in advance to push forward a peace regime and a peace agenda that would reduce security concerns across the border, in the long term, you're going to require China and the U.S. participation in all of this, and you're going to have to talk about more than just declaring peace. You're going to have to talk about military forces at the border in North Korea, U.S. military presence, perhaps reducing military levels across the board to kind of demonstrate an end to hostilities. So there's a lot of details to play out in all of this.
Yes, I mean, the details are important. And at the end, the peace treaty is important. But today, something else is important. It's the mere fact, the pure fact that this summit is taking place. And of course, they will have a declaration that will discuss denuclearization to some extent in general terms. That will take care of a road to a peaceful or more peaceful Korean peninsula. And they will discuss bilateral relations, I guess. The visiting of relatives, the cultural and sports exchange, and so forth. All, by the way, examples that have worked in Germany. When Germany was divided, cultural exchange and sports exchange, there was a sports calendar that had teams, several hundreds of teams per year meet. And through those contacts, of course, change was ongoing. So I think if this, what the grounds have been laid out today, can continue in the weeks and months to come, that's the right track.
Now, as someone who's experienced the, a reunification, what would be your advice to the two Koreas as you see the two Koreas hopefully making a first step towards a possible reunification? We don't know that yet. We don't know whether we all want that yet, even. But
well, I mean, there are some structural similarities, but of course the situation here on the Korean Peninsula is quite different from what we had in Germany at the time. The historical setting was different, but still, the German unification could only have been prepared to a limited extent. It was quite to some extent a management process out of a very dynamic development that was undergoing. So